Billions of players, hours of content, and hours of content to watch, video games have firmly established themselves as a media powerhouse. With movies and merchandise, to specialized video games directed towards education and even the military, we're long past the point of calling video games influential. Obviously, something so influential will have an academia around it. However, with this diverse nature of video games comes a question. What is the field of video games like, academically speaking? Through the use of the following articles, I read and analyzed how they were written, as well as how they explored the various aspects of both the field of games and other relating fields to the topics of the articles themselves. From that process, I hope to provide several examples on the nature of how this area is explored. To first establish a key characteristic of games, let's examine the three articles in question. This first article, Evaluating Existing Strategies to Limit Video Game Playing Time, explores exactly as the title would suggest. Topics relating to sociology and some psychology are important to understanding this research. Meanwhile, the second article has a somewhat similar focus, though a greater emphasis on psychological aspects of games as well as physiological influences. The academics here aim to understand how engagement works in a gamer/viewer relationship. And lastly, in this third article, are virtual reality serious video games more effective than web video games? The focus switches to an educational aspect, all the while being very technical. Now, it is important to mention that I'm exploring how these articles were written and how they shared information. I'm not exploring the articles themselves, so if you're interested in any of these, then they'll be linked in the description. As these topics touch a variety of fields, you can imagine there's a great variety of topics being addressed. As a result, a diverse lexicon is used in each of them. This could be a tripping point for the average reader. Obviously, as the main focus of each article is video games, terminology relating to this area is abundant. Chances are that if you're interested in this field of study, you'll already have a firm grasp on terms like joystick, streaming, virtual reality, and on-rail guided. These are terms that are fairly common amongst video game enthusiasts, let alone those actually interested in the topic as a means of academic study. However, to one that might not play many video games, or if at all, these could be a bit more confusing. As mentioned, while these articles have the focus on video games, other areas of study are used to further that understanding. With that comes terminology related to those fields. Joystick and streaming might be fairly easy to grasp for your average gamer, but what about terms like pupillometry and eye tracking? Or maybe VR HMD device or WebGL? Some of these might be recognizable, but it would be much more dependent on the individual reader rather than the field as a whole. Granted, sometimes terms as these would be defined, but that wasn't always the case. This topic of a lexicon leads itself nicely into the second part of this video, background knowledge. To be fair, having a diverse background knowledge on video games is not explicitly required to grasp concepts being discussed. When there is an important topic being addressed, it will be explained to the reader. For example, each of these articles involve a study where a game is played. One uses an RPG, while the other uses a horror game, and the final is an educational game. In fact, two of these studies actually made the video game specifically for the study. In each case, the game that was chosen and the genre it was from were explored in depth. And the authors wanted to make sure the reader understands why they made the choices they did. While a strong background knowledge in video games isn't strictly required, it does help expand and visualize the information provided to the reader. A simple example can be found in the third article regarding virtual reality. Depending on the person, they might think VR is anything from a Ready Player One experience to a Google Cardboard experience. Depending on which they associate with could impact how they perceive the findings of the studies. In another example, the second article briefly mentions Twitch plays Pokemon. They explain that the game which was played was Pokemon Red, and that it was played by entering commands on Twitch. These couple of sentences do their job in the article by mentioning a situation where viewer engagement was at a peak, but it doesn't mean as much to those who don't know the actual event itself. Twitch Plays Pokemon is far more impressive of an example of viewer engagement once you understand the type of game Pokemon is and how much collaboration was required amongst thousands of viewers. Hopefully these few examples helped clarify the topic. To summarize, the video game industry is incredibly expansive, and the study of video games can, if anything, match that breadth and depth. As you begin to look into this area from an academic perspective, it is important to remember the diverse subjects that will be encountered while reading. Various field-specific lexicons and expected background knowledge might be intimidating at points, but ultimately it shows how much we can come to understand ourselves as we begin to understand the games that we play.